Welcome back. I'm Alfred Lemont Weber, and today we have our distinguished guest, independent scientist Leuren Moret, who's coming to us from Berkeley, California. Welcome, Leuren.
Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to be doing another interview with you, Alfred, and I'm sure the audience is too.
Yes, yes, and I just wanted to mention to the audience that we do have the audio on the highest level possible, and as usual, we do have interference. So if you will just bear with us and perhaps turn your speakers up as much as possible, that would be, you'll get the best reception and enjoyment of this program. Thank you. Leuren, I know that you and I have been speaking and have been very concerned about both the developments in the United States in terms of the operation known as Jade Helm 15, but also the bigger picture, both in the US and in the world. And so could you begin to update us on how you see this in the US now, which seems in the Jade Helm era to really be consolidating and unifying many domestic, you can almost call them domestic pacification programs?
Well, basically it is. It's a smaller piece connected to the soldiers and the equipment they're bringing back from Iraq and Afghanistan. And I have talked to Major Doug Rocky, who I worked extensively with on the depleted uranium issue, and he has very close contacts with people in the Pentagon and high-level people who give him information every day. And I asked him about Jade Helm, and he said, "Oh, one of my friends is a trainer for the people participating, the soldiers participating in Jade Helm, and police and so forth." And he said they've been doing these exercises around the U.S. It was formerly on the East Coast and in the southern states. And he said they've been doing them for a number of years, actually probably since Vietnam. And what I'm seeing are different small projects or past projects like FEMA, MK Ultra, the Phoenix program from Vietnam, which became our FEMA, and COINTELPRO, things like that. Even computer software applications and new programs that I read about in Wired magazine are part of this rollout of all these smaller pieces of a big program that no one was aware of. And so these were just little pieces of the puzzle that no one paid very much attention to. But when I saw in Wired magazine a program called Memory Box, and the article in Wired magazine was explaining how they were able to download a person's entire memory from their brain and load it on a chip. And I just couldn't believe it. But I remember the horrific nuclear weapons related experiments, radiation experiments all through the Cold War, where they went up to Canada and they erased the memories of young teenagers and young adult people. And, you know, some of them are still lying in a bed and don't even know who they are. And this is decades later. So these mind control experiments that were part of MK Ultra were about controlling the minds and the physical presence and functions and everything of a human body. Of course, they started with animal studies at UC Davis and the monkey colony, among other places. And The Soviets were also involved in this. In fact, it sort of came from them in the 30s and the 20s. And actually, HARP was developed during the Cold War secretly with the Soviet Union. And this is all part of what Jade Helm is part of. And basically, when I was at Livermore Lab in 1989 as a staff scientist, my lab partner said to me one day, "Oh, there are two Soviet KGB generals here today." And I said, "This is the middle of the Cold War and they're the enemy. Come on, what are they doing here in the most protected facility in the United States besides Los Alamos Nuclear Weapons Lab?" And he said, "Oh, they're transferring the technologies of political control from the Soviet Union to the U.S. government. And they're doing it here through the Livermore Lab, Nuclear Weapons Lab." So I was really shocked, and I said, "Well, why are they doing that?" Because I couldn't imagine how that would be something Americans wanted. And he said, "Well, they're flipping the United States and turning it into the Soviet Union. And they're flipping the Soviet Union or Russia and turning it into the United States." And you see, that's what this whole geopolitical dance is about now, which, if you go down to finer levels, it involves Jade Helm and gang stalking and many other activities that are being rolled out. In Russia, they are being rolled up, and in the Western economy countries, Japan, North America, and Europe, and they're being rolled down. In fact, they're being kicked into a garbage can, and this is after they're completely stripped of every speck of anything that's worth anything. And this has been going on for centuries, for decades, for millennia. These are just old methods of stealing the wealth of every generation. And it's now, after 40,000 years, concentrated in certain bloodlines that at the top of the Jesuits now, they run the world. And these are ancient Iranian bloodlines that have ruled the world for over 3,000 years. So we're dealing with the future here, which is frightening as an American to watch this being rolled out in California. And that has to be, the West Coast has to be the leading edge. Janet Napolitano, the former Secretary of Homeland Security, and a very strange person, I must say, was hired as the University of California new president. Now, why would you go and hire someone who's basically represents the Jesuit Gestapo and the overthrow and suppression of the American people, and hire that person to run the University of California? Well, they run, they have the management contracts for the nuclear weapons laboratories. They are developing all of these horrific technologies that I'm talking about that are part of Jade Helm as well. And they're weaponizing our adult children using the mind control technologies and algorithms through iPhones, which are computers, very powerful computers. And they're now making phones with flat array antennas, which multiply the power, the impact, the transmission by many, many times. And they're using them as electromagnetic weapons that can be pointed at people and hit them with invisible frequencies that can do many harmful things to their body. So that's where we are now. Our youth, our young people, our university products are being weaponized to attack their own families, their own peers, their own citizens. And in the George Soros Open Society programs and funding and so forth, foreign students are being brought over, and they're being trained in all of these technologies and of political and social control, and then they're sent back to their own countries and they overthrow their own governments. So this has happened in Egypt, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, the Ukraine is the most recent example, and now uh, a very, very, very powerful form of blackmail is being practiced by the U.S. on other countries that will not go along with U.S. policies. And they're threatened with a color revolution, which will certainly overthrow their own sitting president and cabinet.
Right. Now, getting back to your to the state that you're in now, California, is not the governor Jerry Brown?
The governor of California is Jerry Brown. He is in his second double term of being governor. He was reelected after some other people served as governor. And he said, well,
just to get to my point, Jerry Brown is a Jesuit priest.
I'm afraid so.
Now, doesn't that mean something to you? That you have a Jesuit priest as governor of California who has brought in the former director of Homeland Security now to oversee the University of California system, which is one of the largest, quote, educational systems that now we can call one of the largest youth mind weaponizing systems, turning the youth of America into New World Order robotic operatives. Isn't that what? I mean, it would be Jerry Brown who gives he's like the godfather of all jobs in California. And, technically the boards are independent, but once you get the governor's nod, that's how you get a job at that level.
Well, Jerry Brown was a fairly good governor in his first two terms, the first election round. And he did some very strange things. His personal relationships with men and women were a little odd. He was called Governor Moonbeam because of his weird ideas and actions and everything. But he was fiscally very responsible. Now we see him coming in as a rebranded governor, and his excuse is that, well, his father he wanted to be in as long as his father had been governor or longer. And that's his official explanation for why he ran again. But he married a very proper and quiet and subdued woman in his age range. And he walks with her and their dog to his office every day in Sacramento. So he's kind of got he's not into bling or things like that. But all of a sudden, we've got this huge artificial California drought. I go to the farmers markets, and this is obviously a HARP project or program or agenda to take over the water supplies and the allotments and to take control of the California water away from the people and the farmers and agriculture. And so they will use it as a weapon to put farmers out of business and do land grabs where they want the property, they want the land. And of course, the Rothschilds and these Iranian Jesuits at the top are controlling all of this. And they've already taken over the Napa and Sonoma counties, where the finest vineyards in the United States are located north of San Francisco. So Jerry Brown is going to be a HARP governor too. He's already declared a drought. We've actually been above normal rainfall in California for 12 years. We have a surplus of water, and it's being hidden. It's being pumped into the underground reservoirs, natural reservoirs, and hidden from people. And also, I suspect that that agro corporations like Cargill and Monsanto and these Archer Daniel, Midland, and a lot of these are Jesuit or owned or Jesuit linked, and which means they're probably owned too. And so we're going to see more and more GMO. Another thing that's happening is they are growing California almonds. They're just the finest in the world, and different kinds of fruit. And these are being exported to India and China for the expanding middle class, and poorer quality fruits and vegetables and food are being brought into California for the Californians to eat. So we see huge changes in the food supply, food choices, food quality. And then when Janet Napolitano moved into the office as president of the University of California, she brought Homeland Security and FEMA with her. And before she left Homeland Security and FEMA, she had sold Homeland Security FEMA contracts that our Homeland Security and FEMA would serve to 15 other Commonwealth countries. So now we have Janet Napolitano's legacy operating in 15 countries around the world, exporting what we're about to get rolled over on us, and it's not very pleasant. It's communism at its most extreme, and we're going to be poorer than the people in India. The citizens of Ukraine were stripped in 1 year, the year of 2014, from being the richest country in the Soviet Union of all the sister states, and now they have wages that are below the wages of the people in Ghana. And there are mothers killing their newborn babies because they're starving to death.
Right. Now, you've in our conversations, you've described how this kind of technological pacification program is being installed at the street level in that area in Berkeley and in California and in the Bay Area, to where perhaps you can talk about these new forms of light installation, street lights, and also how the networks of the students and of the people that are enrolled in these, they are given these cop toys, and then they are shown targets, and they go after the targets on buses and in the open street. And so that's what's happening now, is open civil war between kind of the cadres of the New World Order and just ordinary folk. Could you talk about that?
Yes, I'm just living it and watching it, and Leuren, who has done a beautiful website for us, he's been part of it too. I mean, we're living through hell here being rolled out. It's horrifying to see. And I know it's happening because I went to the Soviet Union in the 1970s, and I said, I never want to live like this. And ever after, since that visit, I have said, oh, we do really have a lot of freedom in the United States, but it's because of the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution. And as long as people are able to have access to the courts in order to protect their constitutional rights and exercising their constitutional rights, we have the Constitution. But they can't directly attack it to destroy our civil rights, so they're doing it indirectly. And what these programs involve are, for instance, well, let me just talk about the rollout since Homeland Security arrived with Janet Napolitano. Now, she arrived in October of 2013. On January 1st, 2014, she was ensconced in the UC headquarters in Oakland, and she was ready to roll out the Homeland Security FEMA takeover of the West Coast. And this Jade Helm exercise is part of that. And the first thing we noticed were gang stalkers all over the streets January 1st. The world changed. I mean, at first we couldn't believe it. Who are these people? Well, we saw tour buses bringing in homeless people they picked up all over the Bay Area. They had cop toys, cell phones, all kinds of stuff. And they were just wandering through the streets, hitting anyone they wanted to. They are managed and supervised and patrolled by the police departments. And so they were hitting people with these frequencies. And on the BART, the subways, there were professional women who were psychologists or statisticians or cognitive scientists or whatever. And they were sitting there on their laptops with a couple of at least one or two bodyguards, and they were putting everyone in the car to sleep with their computers and the Wi-Fi. And you'd look around, you'd get in that car when you boarded the subway, and everybody was asleep. Everyone in the car except that woman and her two bodyguards. And really strange things. You'd be on the platform, and all of a sudden there'd be people on either side of you, and they've got their cell phones pointed at you, and you've got suddenly a horrible backache, or you've got a Charlie horse in your leg and you can't walk, or your toes are cramping, or you feel lightheaded. And I've even seen them knocking people over and just crashing them into the sidewalk or the platform of the subway station. I've seen that a lot. And these toys are not toys. They were turned over by the U.S. military in 1993 at a secret meeting, a classified meeting at Johns Hopkins University. And this was written up in the Wall Street Journal where I read about it, and there were 5,000 businessmen there to get contracts to manufacture all these cop toys that were from foreign wars, and the Pentagon was turning them over to the police around the United States, law enforcement in the U.S. So since the 1990s, early 1990s, they've had these cop toys, and they've been using them and practicing them, and these are part of Jade Helm also. And in the Wall Street Journal article, it said, oh, and the cops can just point a microwave at a car with these new toys, and they could just bake people in the car like a baked potato. In other words, kill them. They said they could give them heart attacks from a mile away. Well, it's further than a mile away now, because it's all linked up to the cell phone antennas, TV antennas, to cable, to all of the Wi-Fi service operatives, to the lights on the streets. They put new street lights on. They brought these over in boatloads from China. And they have flat array antennas, which the Navy developed in the 1970s. And they are extremely powerful, and they're so powerful, they can miniaturize them, and they're putting them in cell phones now. So when you're walking up down the sidewalk or the street, you're getting hit from these lights. I was walking around down by the freeway in Berkeley in a kind of an industrial area, and I saw this couple, I knew them. I recognized them. It was an Asian woman with a white guy, and they were kind of loitering around at a really strange industrial area. I said, "What are they doing there?" And then I realized it was a setup for me. So she suddenly disappeared. She didn't want me to recognize her or see her, so she kind of scuttled off down the sidewalk away from him and me. And I walked up to him, and he took his cell phone and pointed it up at the street light, and he went click, click, and I had to walk a block from there to the bus stop where I was catching a bus. And I was so crippled and so much in pain the whole time from that little double click of his that I was hardly able to get to the bench to wait for the bus. And this happens in the laundromat next to my house. They have now put a smart meter in the front of the laundromat near the front door, and I have had students come in and click it, and while I was folding my clothes, and all of a sudden I had to go home, put everything in my bag, unfold it, and leave, because I was being horrifically injured and horrible pains from these stupid smart meters. So smart meters, there's nothing smart about them, and there's nothing about the people who are operating them and thinking they're smart while they're destroying their own web of life. That's the stupidity of it all. But you know, I finally, after observing them for a while, I finally began to see why they do it. Why would students deliberately go and knowingly seriously injure people who were strangers on the street or neighbors or whatever? And what I saw on their faces each time they hit a person with these frequencies, and they can break teeth out of your mouth with them. They broke my tooth, and I've seen just everyone I'm talking to who is an activist has missing teeth now. And I just said, how can they do this? How could a 20-year-old do this? Who had a good upbringing and everything, and then I watch their face, and as they're watching people in pain, they're getting an algorithm from their cell phone that goes right into their brain and rewards them for doing it. There is an algorithm reward for doing this. So this is how they have weaponized and hijacked our young adult people. But these are programs the University of California and other universities around the world have been carrying out for decades. We just didn't know it because it was all compartmentalized. Well, now they're putting all these parts and bits and pieces together, and we have Jade Helm arriving in a couple of months, a few weeks, and they are planning to be in plain clothes. They will not be in uniform. Well, they're on an intelligence operation to infiltrate civil society in 5 states, I think Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arizona, and California are the states involved. And all of these technologies will be turned on. They will be integrating and measuring, seeing what the biological feedback is, and they'll be fine-tuning these systems. So I think that's what it's for. I think that's what Jade Helm is for. And to establish snitches, brown shirts, collaborators, cooperators, wherever they can, so that there's a whole secret network we can't see, but they're people we know and we live around and we interact with, and it includes shopkeepers and taxi drivers and bus drivers. Everybody's involved. Grocery stores, and the stores. Most of the shops are so weaponized now with Wi-Fi that they can just torture anyone they want to and target them as they go about their normal business.
Right. So that the whole surface paradigm of, quote, protecting America from foreign invasion is actually turned around, because this is where the citizens themselves are made war on by the government, which has co-opted targeted portions of the citizenry and made them fellow travelers, made them collaborators, in the, actually turned them around and made them military weapons, guided missiles against the society, against the rest of the citizens. So that is a foreign invasion by the government of its own of the citizens against the citizens. And since they control the mainstream media can't report this because reporters either are too mind controlled or they'll lose their jobs. Is that it?
They're terrified. They are being blackmailed and compromised, and also cherry picked for the new reporters are guaranteed to be going along with the program. Now, what they're really attacking at the very bottom of it is they're tampering with our free will and our spirituality, because free will and spirituality are more powerful than any army. It doesn't matter how many nuclear weapons they have, or how many exotic weapons they have, or how many soldiers they have dressed up like penguins with 150 pounds of equipment on them. Ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And all of the army stuff, the uniforms, the helmets, the boots, the equipment, it's all made in our prisons. We're a prison slave society now. And that's why all the silly drug laws, why should the CIA pump $850 billion a year through the U.S. economy as the cash flow, which all comes from drugs, drug racketeering, the global dope enterprise, and people just making pot tea or marijuana, smoking marijuana or whatever to mitigate their pain from radiation-caused cancers and other illnesses. I mean, America's one of the sickest, illest, poorest health societies in the world. And a lot of it is due to the nuclear weapons program, as well as the nuclear power program. Well, now we're poisoning the whole world. And the United States has become a genocidal extension. It's no longer a country or a democracy. It's a genocidal extension, and the Zionist application of the top Jesuits.
Right. You have I identified an early text on this by Colonel Ramsey. Could you tell us more about that?
This is a fantastic book, and if you want to read it online, we have it on our website, LeurenMoret.info, and my name is spelled LEUREN.info. Oh, Moret, MORET.info. And we do have this book. It's called The Nameless War. And it's all of the wars for the last 1,000 years, going back to the Crusades almost. Well, halfway back to the Crusades. And all of these wars for the last 1,000 years have all been carried out by the same people. It explains how they came in the French Revolution, in the Spanish Revolution, in all these revolutions. These are people who are aliens. They're not even citizens of the country that they're overthrowing. And they come in, they infiltrate neighborhood meetings, regional meetings, all levels of civil society. It doesn't take very many of them. And they're the ones who overthrow the governments in the countries. And we're seeing it live in the Ukraine. It's exactly how they do it. And I think since this template that the Nameless War that Gordon Ramsay or Colonel Ramsay wrote, he wrote it as a member of the British Parliament in the early 1940s, and he knew another world war was coming, and he wrote it to try and stop that World War II, and to expose this nameless war, which is just a template, a Jesuit template, or the Iranian, that ancient Iranian bloodline uh, project that they've been carrying on for thousands of years. And I see it right here in my neighborhood. We have an Opus Dei house across the street. Well, I saw huge antennas there, groups of students going in and out, and they'll live there a year or 2 years. They're being trained to do all these overthrows, to sabotage any targets anyone they're told to target. And this will be after they leave the university and they go to work out in the workplace. So they're going to be sabotaging corporate workers and corporate social and civil society, and reshaping whatever these people in control have decided they want changed and how they want it changed. And I've had phone calls for 20 years back into the 1980s by people, husbands, telling me this young woman got hired, and I think she's hacking into my computer, and she's doing all these things that are disruptive, and now my marriage is falling apart. My wife is an heiress and I really love her and we have children, but all of a sudden she doesn't trust me anymore and she's leaving, and she's being handled by some mysterious uh, uh, group of people, and I see that all over now. They're targeting the oldest children in a family, the firstborn, because they have more expectations of them from previous generations of the family coming in as the leader of the new generation. There are many more expectations. So they're also pulling people with mathematical abilities, because this is all run on mathematics. And if mathematicians can figure out how to undo it, they're targeting honest people, they're targeting loving people, caring people, and they're just dehumanizing our society. They're dehumanizing us. They're changing churches into cults. Everything is a cult, or people are just being completely isolated through the technology and everything. And then, of course, these foreign students are brought to the United States by George Soros at the Open Society. They're given $10,000 or $20,000 to go for a quarter or a semester here at Berkeley. They get a brand new wireless computer, and then they are not required to attend classes while they're here. They're encouraged to go shopping in San Francisco and spend this extra money they've never had on consuming American clothing, the American look, American makeup, American hairstyles. And they get addicted to it, this consumption of American lifestyle. And almost all of these people who are brought over here by the Open Society are teachers. So they're going back to Kazakhstan or Tajikistan or Azerbaijan or Turkmenistan or wherever they're from, Egypt or Kuwait or whatever. And they are completely obsessed with this American consumption, and they're wearing all these trophies of their trip into the classroom and infecting all their students with this new society, and it's replacing the traditional indigenous societies and values and destroying them.
Right, right. And you were talking about that in Berkeley now, the students are actually getting training on how to not only subvert foreign governments, but how to subvert the American government. Could you talk about that?
Yes, since about 2000, I've been living in Berkeley 20 years, almost 15. But since 2000, I've been able to observe a slow development and recognition that the University of California has cell houses on every block, and so do the police. And in these cell houses that the university sets up, they'll take over a whole apartment building. The landlords are in on it, and suddenly all of the buildings and the houses and everything, it's mandatory for everyone in a neighborhood, a certain neighborhood, to paint their houses completely, new paint, and to landscape their yards, because the University of California and the city of Berkeley are now the property of the Jesuits. They consider this to be their land, their library, their university, their students. They own it all, lock, stock, and barrel, the entire border of the city of Berkeley. But it's not only that. Here's the Open Society, George Soros and the Rockefellers again. The Rockefeller Foundation, because the Soros works for the Rockefellers also, but the Rockefellers have put up a list on their foundation website with 100 cities named on it. And it said, these are the special natural hazard proof cities now of the world. And what they are the New World Order cities. They're all set up with Wi-Fi, with EMF, with transmitters, with antennas everywhere. And no one can enter these areas without being attacked with frequencies. They can destroy your car. They can give you a heart attack. They can do anything they want to. They can use mind control and have you drive right into a tree and kill yourself and your family. Because I've seen this happening in parking lots and stage crashes. They're very, very controlled. They're controlled by computers. And it's pretty weird what's happening, but this is the New World Order plan. And thank God Putin said it will never work. They're going to hurt a lot of people. It's a horrendous project, but it will never work. And for someone like Putin, who was in the KGB through the Cold War and who has now been president and prime minister of Russia, he's now the president again. It's pretty interesting for him to say that, because I do trust what he says in terms of in that respect, because he's fighting it. And he does not believe in a unipolar world. He believes in a multipolar world. And he set up a new international bank, the BRICS Bank, to counter the IMF and the World Bank. It's a new system, and the member founding countries put the money in to start this bank, and it will be for redevelopment in their own countries with money that they contributed and they pooled. It's like a Chinese association. And so in a Chinese association, people will go to a new country and they work in restaurants and they sleep under the back steps until they have enough money saved. They put it into the Chinese association. And then they're able to borrow enough money in that pool of money, shared money, to start a business. They pay that back, and then other members take that money and they start businesses, and the whole community comes up like that. And that's exactly what President Xi of China and President Putin of Russia are carrying out now. They have created two huge new regional trading blocs. Putin started the Eurasian trading bloc, which includes Russia and other countries, part of Europe. And China has started the Asian trading bloc, which includes South Korea and other Asian countries. And now these can collaborate, and they will all be part of BRICS Bank. And the currency, the ruble, is completely in the Russian economy. The ruble is completely backed by gold. And in the BRICS Bank, gold will be part of the currency because Asians don't trust paper money, and they will be preferring, and also Middle Easterners, gold, actual gold transfers.
Right, right. Now, just to ask you, what do you do yourself, and what do you suggest that Americans who are now facing Jade, Helm, and the sort of the pacification, to use the word that, Vietnam was the subject of the Phoenix program, so the pacification program, and it looks like there's one in Berkeley where the government is coming in, and they're pacifying the community by having turning half of the community into government operatives. That's that are at war with the rest of the population. How does one live down there?
Well, I was talking about these cell houses. Now, Opus Dei is an organization. It's supposed to be Catholic, but it's not really Catholic. It's like the Jesuits. It's a military organization, and it's training people. Actually, a lot of them are atheists. A lot of the members of the U.S. Supreme Court have ties to Opus Dei. Well, it's part of the Jesuits also. But these are students living there for whatever reasons they were selected. And they're learning how to move antennas around on the roof of this house or on the porches of this large house. And they actually targeted me when I did a very, very important publication in England in Namaste magazine on depleted uranium. And it was called Populations Exposed to Depleted Uranium. It's on our website. Increased risk of cancers and infertility. And that caused the nun, Dr. Rosalie Bertell, who was actually an agent of the Pope and the Vatican. She sent me a death threat from Canada. And then about 6 months later, I wrote another article about the huge dispersion of more radiation into the ocean than ever before anywhere else on the planet until Fukushima happened. And it was being dumped from the Sellafield, or before that it was called Windscale, the Sellafield nuclear power plant in Cumbria, which is on the west coast of England, just north of Wales. And that was actually a setup for getting ocean current information in order to develop HAARP in some of those programs and to set up Fukushima. So anyway, these radiation programs are also part of what's going on here in Berkeley. But they slashed my face, my chin, with a microwave knife from a giant antenna. It was 10 or 20 feet long. And I saw them taking it apart at different times and moving it around different sides of the house. So they were obviously had a secret communications network and system in this neighborhood, and they still do. Well, what they've done now is to go from these antennas that are adjustable and movable and portable, and they are now transmitting Wi-Fi and these obnoxious EMF frequencies, Wi-Fi frequencies that make you sick and sleepy, all kinds of things. And they have moved them into the sewer lines. And this is a secret network, which I heard about in Berkeley maybe around 2003, but I didn't believe it. And but around this neighborhood, the neighbors who are involved, renting to students with this program, it's all illegal, so it has to be done secretly. Um, and these apartment buildings with the students in them that you see as training in these special covert programs, and it's men in long coats and hats that come over their faces who show up in the middle of the night and get out of black cars. And they go into these various buildings that in dark, in the middle of the dead of night. They also have day meetings, but I don't see them attending those once or twice. Usually it's lower level people, supervisors and so forth, who come and go to the physical apartments where the students are doing this. I've also seen Berkeley policemen undercover or in plain clothes going in and out of Opus Dei on a weekly basis. And they are afraid of me. They don't want to be around me with a dog. They don't want to get near any dogs. They're breaking into people's houses. And this is the kind of stuff that our taxes are paying for. And there's no one to make any accountability because it's all an inside thing. It's all been set up. I mean, look how they've Swiss cheesed the U.S. government. You go to the drivers, the Division of Motor Vehicles, the DMV, in the state now, any office, there's a 5 or 6 hour wait. You can't even do anything. You call up a courthouse. Well, their hours have been reduced. They're working half time now. And on some days they're not open at all. And they were already bursting with lawsuits and cases and family issues and juvenile court. They didn't have enough courtrooms or judges or lawyers before they reduced the hours. And now I just went to the law library. I get gang stalked by UC operatives every time I'm there. And the law library, a huge law library across from the Oakland courthouse, and they're in danger of being shut down because the money to support the law library, which serves the public as well as the lawyers and the whole judicial system, they were supporting it through the fees that are paid by people filing lawsuits. Well, there's so many fewer lawsuits now because there isn't time for it or money for it or whatever. They're not getting the government support to file the lawsuits or help or anything. And so they're talking about closing the public law library. I just can't believe it. I just can't believe it. They're shutting down everything, and we're going into the dark ages. They're cutting the libraries. We're going to be living in the United States in worse slavery and submission than in the Soviet Union during the Cold War. And there are 2 KGB Soviet generals at Homeland Security running it now. They're setting up the ID cards. They're setting up the technologies of political control, all this EMF stuff. And Jade Helm is just a part of all of this.
Right. And you say all this fits into Jade Helm and the overthrow of the U.S. government and the destruction of the U.S. Constitution.
Yes. And it's not only that. Chabad House, which I call Mossad House, is also right here in this, within half a block. There's a cafe where they all hang out. There are apartment buildings. There are apartments with police operatives. These are people who work directly for the police. And they're all sandwiched in with the students. They come out and they help the UC people unload these antennas that are hidden in containers on top of cars. The whole containers removed and carried into the house. Um, at least 5 houses around me, including the one I'm living in the last year and a half, they've had the whole foundation and one whole corner of the house, of every one of these houses, excavated. They had transmission, ground wave transmitters, and other kinds of transmitters installed underground, attached to the foundation of the house, and they are transmitting ground waves all night long that affect anyone they want to target in this neighborhood. And then they're all connected with a whole physical network so that they can multi-vector a target from every direction. They were targeting the youngest member of the Japanese parliament. He came here to stay, and he got engaged because of me. I sat and talked to him and his fiance, who's a friend of mine from my Japanese time, into getting married, getting engaged. And the whole time they were here, they couldn't sleep. They were targeted with this EMF. There were old ratty bums with sores, festering sores all over their faces, following them around whenever we went out of the house or just sitting outside the door. So this has been going on in Berkeley for a long time, and these are some more of the parts of the pieces of this bigger project, a takeover of the United States and reduction of the quality of life in the United States to a point where there will be no ownership of anything. No one will be allowed to own anything. No ownership. And already the offshore ship has been put out in international waters. It was worked on. It's an old Maersk ship with a solid steel hull. It was stripped and then refitted, a warehouse built on the upper deck and loaded with servers. And about a year ago, about the springtime of 2014, that ship disappeared, and all of a sudden everything started being integrated, all the wireless stuff and antennas and cell phones, and all this targeting got much more intense because that ship was out in international waters, and everything that has anything to do with smart meters is transmitted to that ship 200 miles offshore, where it's not violating the Constitution because this is unconstitutional. And it's uploaded from those servers onto the Inmarsat satellites, and it's transmitted to the Cameroons to a geostationary satellite, which has all the Homeland Security information. All the information from these smart meters is going there every second. Every second. And then it's streamed to the headquarters of Inmarsat in England. Now, the Inmarsat was started as a radio company in Holland, and the Dutch military needed something to run a satellite system with, so they bought this radio company, and it eventually evolved into Inmarsat. So here we see that telltale fingerprint again of the Dutch. The Dutch were involved in MH17, the plane that crashed in the Ukraine. It was shot down by Ukrainian government troops with a Buk missile, and that has just come out now in a special book or a special article written in a British newspaper, and it's been confirmed that it was shot down with a Buk M1 missile, which is only manufactured in the Ukraine. They modified a Soviet system, but the Ukraine is the only one who has the M1s, and the Ukrainian government troops are the only one who have that M1 missile. the militia or the separatists did not have that. And so who else could have done it? Well, now this investigation by this media outlet has exposed and confirmed that the UK troops, the Ukrainian government troops, did it. And quite recently, in the Debaltsevo Cauldron in February of 2015, when 10,000 Ukrainian troops were killed in 2 days because they refused to leave the area they'd been occupying for a year, and they were completely surrounded and out of ammunition and food. And for a week, the militia, the separatists, asked them to surrender and to leave all of their equipment on the battlefields. They refused to do it. So they were killed. It was the militia had no choice. They had to do that. And all the battalion commanders, all the leadership, all the generals had abandoned all their troops, 10,000 men without any leaders, and many of them were untrained. They'd been kidnapped off the streets and driven to the battlefield and said, here, you're a soldier now. And it was just horrendous. All the leaders, the military leaders, were in Kiev, half of the country away. So we see this insanity, and it's got to be mind control. It's just so crazy. It's it counters all our values and our systems and our beliefs. People just can't be doing that if there are normal conditions.
So what you're saying is that what we're really talking about during this program of Americans versus Americans is that the country's being taken down through mind control programs.
It's mind control programs. It's an algorithm. It's 23 acres or miles or whatever of supercomputers underground in Langley, Virginia, and other locations in the United States. And it's just a rollout, and you can feel it, the timing. Every January 1st, a new program and intensity gets ratcheted up. And then you can feel a shift. And it's a shift in the intensity of the Wi-Fi. It's a shift in how much it penetrates you and how deeply physiologically it gets into you. They were just hitting the skin and making you itch and burn, and they can make brown spots all over you. It's premature aging. They do it with infrared. So they were doing that, but now they're doing deep psyche and deep physical, much more harmful, much more subtle, and much more penetrating. And it's just, the purpose is to make people bow their heads and hunch their backs and submit completely.
Right. Well, we've come to the end of this segment. Do you have anything that you haven't been able to say that you'd like to say?
Well, this Wi-Fi is very intense, and it's very sensitive, and it's very pervasive. But the people who refuse to submit to it, who refuse to be controlled by it, you can fight it, and when they can't play their game with you, they walk away. They want easy meat. They want easy victims. They want easy manipulation. And I want to tell you something, they're not very smart. These are dumb people with character defects. They've been injured mentally from the nuclear bomb testing. These are not the best of society. These are the bottom of society. These are the people who can't make it. And they're suddenly getting prestige. They're giving them free cars, computers. Some of them were homeless. They end up with apartments. They are rewarded in ways that are meaningful to them. I have noticed that the quality of the gang stalkers has improved as the homeless people who were out in the rain in the wintertime, which this radioactive rain and the chemtrails came with Janet Napolitano. We have 6 layers of airplanes almost every day at different altitudes chemtrailing the Bay Area. So these chemtrails are part of Jade Helm. They're part of all of it, and it's all pieces of puzzles, of programs, of things that we walk by every day in times past, and didn't realize that all these pieces would be put together, and suddenly there's this gigantic grizzly bear in the living room, and we don't have a gun or anything. So people need to talk about it. They need to share the information and increase awareness of their neighbors and their family members. If people are not ready for it, that's all right. But just tell them about it and tell them where the information is. And when they're ready, they will go and find it, and they'll be better researchers than even we are. So it's empowering. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's something to face and to deal with, and don't do it alone. There are lots of people around you who want to stop it also. And after all, Alfred, we're the only ones who are going to stop it.
That's right. We're the ones we've been waiting for, as they say.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we the people. And so a lot of people are going to get very hurt. A lot of people are dying. A lot of people are dead. Many people have been assassinated. The United States has a very, very, very bloody domestic history. So don't ever think this is a democracy. It's not. But we have had a constitution, and people who exercise their constitutional rights were successful going through the courts. It's the free speech movement in the 1960s that woke everyone up. And those were a bunch of hippies. And look how they changed things.
Very, very good. Well, we really want to thank you for your work and for taking this time out to come and to update us. And we look forward to you coming on again in the future to update us as events develop. Thank you, Leuren.
Thank you. And just remember, love is the answer.
Yes, yes, indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.